All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this session with Jen today, who's the founder of Jellyfish. And she'll be sharing her experience about how to expand into the US and how to think about your business and sales strategy while being an international startup. Uh, we have a hot stop at 11:50, but while Jen is sharing her experience, feel free to post your questions on the chat. We'll keep the session very engaging and Q&A driven. And then with that said, Jen, all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. And it's wonderful to connect with you all. I'll just do a quick background on who I am, and then maybe we'll just start letting questions fire. If not, I'll share some stories as well. So we launched Jellyfish about 5 years ago. The reason why we launched Jellyfish is we saw a massive problem in the market, and that is 95% of international startups seeking to expand into the US market fail, right? Whether you're coming out of Canada, the UK, India, Australia, that failure rate is insanely high, especially if you're a well-funded, somewhat mature company. So we set out to say, well, wait a second, why is that failure rate so high? And the reason being is there's two traditional ways you expand into the US market. You yourself as the founder come in, navigate the commercial ambiguity. Probably takes you about 2 years to figure it out with all the other things you have going on. And most founders typically do not have a commercial background, like they're extremely product, technical, or engineering centric. So that's problem one. Problem two is they quickly delegate this to a non-founder and expect this person to figure out how to sell. The US market is an extremely unique place because the competition is insanely high, right? With the average buyer, I think gets about anywhere between 30 to 50 notes a day with someone trying to sell them something. So how do you stand out? Two, why is someone going to take a risk on you when there's a company here currently based in the US selling tangential or similar value? And then three, just figuring out how to navigate who early adopters are is extremely tough, right? So what we said is, well, why can't there be a model where a founder actually has a commercial co-pilot embedded alongside them to help them navigate this extremely ambiguous journey? So we've worked with I think we're on our 73rd engagement. So we worked with over 73 B2B and enterprise startups. Our specific focus is obviously in the B2B space. And we work with markets including Australia, India, the UK, and then obviously Canada. And a lot of Canadian founders think that they know the market and it's fairly straightforward to jump into, but that's usually a very large misconception. So that's why we launched Jellyfish. I'm obviously one of the co-founders, and going from 0 to 1 is an absolute passion point. And it's one of the most handmade milestones a startup goes through. There is nothing scalable about going from 0 to 1, let alone 0 to 1 in the US market. So that's a little bit of background on myself and why we launched Jellyfish. But I've opened it up to any questions so far and happy to share some stories.
I mean, I have a ton of questions, but it's not going to be related to what you had just said in terms of your stories and how to penetrate, so to speak. So those would come later. So if anyone else has one, feel free. But if not, I do want to kind of go a different route.
Well, I definitely want to know how you guys work. I mean, it's there are a lot of startups with a lot of diverse activities. I mean, how would your company position itself to help them all across different parts of the market?
It's a little hard to hear you. Am I the only one here having challenges?
We lost you, Mohsen. But I think his question is more around Jellyfish and how your company works in navigating different regions and different market. That's what his question is. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do is explain like what a founder needs to go through, because that's how we've structured our model. I don't want to make this about Jellyfish because that's not really where we're going to get most of the learning. So I'll focus on like
Yeah.
why we structured it that way. So first and foremost, when you come into the US market, okay, it needs to be founder led. Do not delegate this to anyone. The only time you are able to now delegate sales in the US is once you have referenceable customers, so logos they can reference in emails. You have case studies, so proof that you guys can deliver on the work you've sold. And 3, you've defined the recipe for inspiring and closing executives, right? A non-founder will never be able to sell your solution if you yourself haven't proven it yet, right? Because they don't have the social capital of the title of founder. And 2, they don't have the vision and passion that you can speak to. All right, so that's first and foremost. Do not delegate sales to anyone. This has to be founder led. And while that is not typically what people want to hear, it's how people become successful. So 2, a big misconception is people just go out and sell just like they have been in their local market. When you enter the US, you have to go through a learning sprint, right? You need to be able to validate what does the US market actually care about, because it's 99% of the time different than what your local market cares about. 2 is whom is your early adopting customer base, right? When you look at the US market as a whole, right, and you think about all of the buyers you could sell to, only 15% of the people that you will reach out to qualify as an early adopter. And that's based off of the crossing the chasm, mental model. So if you have to reach out, if 15% of your market is potentially an early adopter, how do you even begin identifying signals of whom those people are? All right. And a lot of that has to come down to, is the person you are targeting, is there frequency and intensity around the pain they are feeling, right? Are they able to articulate the implication for not solving it? Right. And then 3rd is, have they been able to, or have they tried to seek for solving it in the past 6 months? Right. Early adopters are people that are currently in the process of looking to close the gap amid a problem exists and are seeking to solve for it. Right. A non-early adopter is someone that says, oh, I didn't even realize that was the problem. And no, we have not looked for a solution yet. That's going to be a long sales cycle, and they're going to want to see referenceability. So spend your time, first on first meetings and reaching out to whom you specifically want to learn from. That is, right, exhibiting the pain, but more importantly, can clearly articulate what happens if they don't solve for it. Okay, so being able to spend your time talking to early adopters is critical, because you, the founder, have limited time. You need to make sure you're learning from and potentially selling to people that exhibit the signals of that criteria.
So is there a stage that founders like really know that when you're really ready to sell into the US, like how early you can be, like say you're working with several Canadian customers, but you have no visibility in the States. Is that the right time to break into?
So the best time to break into it, I think there's 3 ways to slice it. The first way is we have built for the US market in mind first, right? Some companies and some founders have gone out with that because they themselves want to prove this market out first, because it's the largest market, especially in the B2B space. So if you haven't had that mindset, obviously you can cross that off. The second is, do you have a local market product market fit, right? Like, have you been able to generate your first $500 to $1 million in your local market? If so, you will probably have the team able to continue to serve that. You will now be able to focus your time in the US. All right. And then 3rd is, you might be pushed by investors to go figure out the US market. Right. Once people raise a fairly large round, their investors are going to say, we want to see traction in the US. Right. Do not come to the US because, you're like, oh, this is going to be easy and people have a higher willingness to spend. Have it be driven by something. Right. You've already seen local product market fit in your local market. Your investors are asking you for it, or 2, you've built for the US market in mind first. And if your TAM, right, your total addressable market, if it's greater than 50% of your market is here, come here yesterday, right? Because you want to make sure you're not solidifying your product to a market that, the US is like, well, that's not how we buy, or we need you to be able to integrate with Salesforce or things like that.
And how important is the local presence? So when you're talking about founder-led sales in the US, is it important to physically be present or
No.
okay.
Yeah, you do not have to be physically here in the US market, right? For two reasons. One is COVID has certainly expedited. Here's an interesting thing. Most buyers do not want to meet you until, and only until, a proposal or a verbal yes has been agreed to. Right? There's too much pressure to meet someone face to face, especially now. Like, people are super protective of their time, especially an executive. An executive is going to be way more willing to jump on a 30-minute call than schedule a 30 to an hour one-on-one meeting. So do not push for in-person until it's much later stage, and see if it's a requirement for them. Sometimes they're like, yeah, we've purchased SaaS before. Again, early adopter. They have purchased SaaS before. They see the reward outweighs the risk. They're not going to require you to meet face-to-face. A laggard might. But when you're selling to an early adopter, every early adopter we've helped our past customers sell to, they've never had to come and meet face-to-face. And if they want to meet you face-to-face, ask why. They're like, happy to, but is there a reason why you want us to meet face-to-face? Sometimes it's not. There's no reason.
What about if they say, that's the way we do business? Is that a red flag right away?
I would just say it, based off of other partners you have worked with that are similar startups, have you met them face to face? And if the answer is yes, then obviously you probably want to meet them face to face. But in most cases, again, an early adopter is not going to require that.
Right. Going back to what you were saying about how, you're going to have to spend some time understanding US market versus the Canadian. And how do I word this? If US customers are coming to you,
yep,
you're based in Canada, US customers are coming to you, can you then, and this isn't something we're going to do, but a question is, can you then assign someone else to do the, learning from those US customers, and then they go out afterwards and sell for you?
Have you closed any US customers?
Yeah, we've already closed one.
You've closed one?
Yeah.
Do that after 10.
So then, we continue closing them, and then I get that individual to learn from those 10, and then they can go and sell afterwards.
Correct. So how you want to think about it is, when you will hire someone that's a non-founder to do this, they need to be able to have a case study they can share, because remember, no one really wants to speak to a salesperson. That's a fact, right? So the reason why it's much easier to do founder-led selling is people have no problem speaking to a founder. But unless you have case studies and logos they can reference, it's going to be much harder for them to get meetings and to get deals advanced. Right? So you want to make sure that that recipe has been built. And you also want to understand your conversion metrics to understand if they're performing. So if first call to second call is a 50% conversion, and then you're noticing they're only converting at 20%, there's a problem. So you want to also be able to quickly benchmark what conversions are if it was founder-led selling, so that you know how to hold them accountable. Remember, 9 out of 10 salespeople fail, let alone 9 out of 10, let alone without a process in hand. So you really want to make sure you're handing over a tight process, conversion metrics to hold them accountable, and the referenceability they need to be successful.
Right. Now, again, going back to what you were saying, how the US market is totally different than the Canadian. Now, in terms of pain points, perhaps they're the same. Are you saying the buying process, the way you have conversations with them, the way you pressure, that sort of thing is totally different? Or are you saying the pain points are different too?
It can be everything. It can be different. So it can be from price point. Price point's always going to be different. The US market is a much higher threshold to spend. 1. 2 is the US market will commoditize you very quickly. So if you come to them and say, oh, here's what we solve, and they say, great, here are a few, and you say to them, remove our solution, what other alternatives do you guys have available? Because you want to understand, have they done due diligence on the market? And they're like, well, these other solutions also exist. They're going to commoditize you very quickly to that. Right? So you want to spend the time learning so that you separate yourself from that pack. Because as soon as they commoditize you, they're going to hold you accountable to keep the pricing the same. right? So when you're entering the US market, you're usually entering a market that is being overserved with their need, meaning there's available alternatives that they can select from beyond you.
Right.
And you need to understand what is that secondary job to be done that they are seeking to solve for that the other team are clearly not hitting on. So let's say you're solving for, let me just make up an easy example. Let's say you're selling a CRM solution. Okay. Tons of CRM solutions available. So the need of having a CRM solution has been met. Like you can't just sell against that. You now just need to sell against and understand, okay, but what do your users and your salespeople need from the CRM to get them to use it? Because we know that your data integrity is extremely weakened with Salesforce, right? And they might say, we need to be able to set up stage gates that in order for them to advance a deal, they have to check off 3 different things and input the data. It's like, okay, so you need to make this configurable to your specific sales pipeline. But with Salesforce, that makes it super challenging because you need to hire someone externally to do this. So the secondary job to be done, we now know, is the ability to make this flexible and configurable. No one's probably selling against that, right? They're just selling a CRM. So it's the idea of when you're entering an overserved market, you have to uncover that secondary job to be done because most of the market's already selling against the primary job to be done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. One question that comes up from that, you mentioned that the US market has more money to spend, but you were saying that it's overserved.
Yes.
So, basic economics would say that, your price should be lower then. But I guess you're saying is that you're supposed to differentiate and improve the value of your
Correct
company through problem solving or I guess discovery, and then either building out the product or at least telling them how your product will serve the pain points that they have.
Correct. Because competition erodes profitability.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. However, let's say it's like a race to the bottom. You do not want to be the bottom solution because the US market puts a value on price. It's a very value price driven.
You never want to be.
Correct.
Yeah. So when you're going down, let's say we've done our discovery calls. We understand some of the pain points. Obviously, you'll never figure out all of them, but the majority. How do we understand the price that we should be, selling?
Yeah. So it will come down to 2 things. Are you entering a saturated competitive market? Therefore, your price is you're going to be held accountable to what your alternatives are pricing it at, right? You could be 20% better, but if they're 30% cheaper, they're always going to go with 30% cheaper, right? Because for them, that's just the way it is, right? You've got to be significantly better for them to give you more money and get that value. If you're entering an underserved market, right, where there's not many alternatives available, right, you set the price. Okay, so it depends on which market you're falling into. Overserved market, you can compete on price, but it's going to be very commoditized to what your alternatives are charging. Underserved market, you get to set the price. But the trade-off is in an underserved market, your sales cycles are typically twice as long as an overserved market because they already have a budget that you can take versus an underserved market, you have to create a budget to take.
Mohsin, your speak is working. Do you want to jump in?
My problem is that my voice probably is going to be really bad. I think I have to.
No, I think we can hear you now.
Yeah, so my question, still remains. I'm trying to understand. So you guys help other companies get into new markets? Is that, or am I? This is completely different. Sorry.
No, we embed alongside founders, venture-backed founders seeking to expand into the US market. And we help scale their time by helping them quickly validate messaging, where their early adopters are, what their value proposition needs to be, what their pricing structure needs to be, and then most importantly, what their sales process is.
So my question, goes back that, the market is so expansive, So for instance, we are in healthcare, right? And somebody else is in tech, I mean, how would you position differently? Do you have an expansive team to do that? Because, the healthcare is a whole beast by itself, right?
Sure.
And it's completely different from another SaaS business. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it depends on obviously that part of the healthcare market you are in. Like right now, we're working with a very large health insurance company looking to launch 2 new products in the US market, right? But it's not highly regulated, right? It's more like a teledoc solution versus like if you're selling like biotech, like regulated FDA needs to be approved and involved. We don't touch that because that's a totally different sales model and sales process. We work with like future of work, logistics tech, legal tech, HR tech, MarTech, sales ops, DevOps, 90% of what the SaaS market is, that's our sweet spot. And while those markets are different, meaning the buyers and the solutions they're selling, customer discovery doesn't change. It's still a scientific process, right? And the founder is deeply involved, so they can speak to the solution. What they're hiring us for is to pull out the market insights as quickly as possible and define the go-to-market. So that's what we've built and where we're focused. So what percentage of folks on this call are looking to expand into the US market over the next 6 months? Remove everything I've shared. How are you going to do it?
I can talk about ourselves. We actually added the board advisors with expertise in the healthcare sector in the US market. So we have like 4 advisors that have been in different sectors of healthcare, and we are trying to capitalize on that to find the best, go to market and ICP and all those stuff.
So how are your advisors going to help you with that? They can make warm introductions?
Well, we have been some warm introductions, but a lot of it was, recognizing the ICP. What is the message that what is the value added that we provide to that ICP? Prioritizing, against different things with their knowledge of the market and stuff like that.
But you're still going to be leading that, correct?
One of my co-founders is leading the sales in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's a founder.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I can go next.
Leonard, how about yourself?
We got 4 different routes or avenues. The first is obviously inbound, but maybe I can push on that a little bit. Leveraging the existing customer I already have. He's already expressed interest in introducing me to several of like companies to sell to, and there might be setting up a profit sharing incentive there, or at least a discount on his services. The next is we've got an advisor who his primary business is leading an organization which most of our customers are a part of. I don't want to go too far into that, but so the advisor can make introductions to those companies right to the potential buyer. The next is we were exploring channel partners. We found 2 that are interested in selling our services. We are waiting to sign on to those because, as you kind of put it, we need to understand our customers a little bit better in the US market and develop a repeatable sales process that we can actually give to, those channel partners. I think it would be a waste of time and potential tarnish to our brand, letting them kind of handle that. So, those are three, and we've got one other, which is through Oracle. But I wouldn't even consider that as as kind of like a strategy.
You mean as like a channel partner?
Well, no, they actually want to just sell, or not sell. They want to introduce us to their customers, not even from a channel partner perspective or profit sharing. They literally just want to introduce us to their customers who are experiencing the pain points that we're solving. And the reason is that they can keep their customers on the Oracle ecosystem, since we use Oracle.
Got it. Okay, interesting. So they are actually the ones feeling the most pain. They just want their customers to pay for it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Haha, that's funny. That's actually a great place to be. It's like first and second order pain there. Got it. And how are the inbound folks finding you?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, they Google searches or word of mouth. We are targeting the architectural, engineering, construction industry, and we're literally the only one who can offer a personal computer in the cloud, high performance personal computer in the cloud, for the price that makes sense, I guess, without going too much into what we do. So the architectural, engineering, construction market is very personal. People, like, it's relationship driven. A lot of people ask others within the industry what solutions they are using, and perhaps what they can do. And so I would say 30% has come, or 30% of interest has come through that, whereas 70% has been through just Google searches.
Okay. And have you done any outbound cold yourself?
In the States, not yet.
Okay. You might want to test that, like, based off of the inbound folks the beauty with outbound is you get to select who you learn from and sell to.
Right.
So it's one of the best levers to pull and validate quickly, because you can also control your numbers, right? So if you were to go raise another round of funding, right, they're going to want to know, if I put $1 into sales and marketing, what's my output? And then you can help explain that storyline very clearly, because inbound, it's still very much driven on people that raise their hand or in search, versus outbound, you're actually controlling whom you're speaking to, learning from, trying to attract, and then the number of people you reach out to on a daily basis. My only thing with Oracle is, until you have actually understood how to sell this directly, you might not want to rely on them to sell this on your behalf. Maybe allow them to make introductions, but don't let them sell this on your behalf, because they will potentially missell it.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to own that narrative and that storyline, and you also want to own those conversations.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I guess one question when you recommend outbound sales, here in Canada, I have tons of relationships, so I leverage a lot of those for warm introductions. However, if I do cold calling, I just run a search through Mergent Intellect, and for the specific criteria, it yields 1,000, 2,000 companies, and then from there I figure out who I need to talk to through LinkedIn or their company website or something. Is it the same strategy for the States, or should it be through LinkedIn, where I just run some searches through their sales navigator, and cold call like that? Should it be phone calls? How do you?
Yeah, what channels to use? So what's the target role you're going after?
Yeah, director of technology, VP of technology.
Okay, those people are not responding to LinkedIn. HR is on LinkedIn, sales is on LinkedIn. Engineering folks are not on LinkedIn, and nor are they going to pick up a phone call. Email is the best way to reach out to that target audience.
And how are you getting their emails?
So the easiest way to do that is there's a tool that I use called, hold on, what's it called?
There are several Chrome extensions. One is hunter.io.
Yeah, hunter.io is what I use, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a good tool. And then more sales QL. There's a new tool in the market called LeadJet, and that syncs up your LinkedIn and your CRM. So it's a new tool in the market. You know,
What's it
just
called? Lead chat?
LeadJet.
Jet.
LeadJet.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And the other way to do it, if for some reason you're having problems looking, you could quickly look to see how you go to their PR page and see how their PR individual has their it's usually like first initial last name at, and then whatever their domain is, first name dot last name at. It's not that hard to figure out if you just spend a little bit of time just scraping their PR and communications leads.
Right. Fair. Okay.
And then sometimes it's just founder at too, if you're reaching out to startups, if you're trying to reach out to the founders. But yeah, if you're targeting engineering centric folks, absolutely email. I don't know any of them that will probably respond to LinkedIn. Most of them are not going to be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a dumpster fire for certain roles.
Okay. Sounds good.
And then Twitter as well. Obviously a lot of engineering and technical centric. If you could DM them on Twitter, that's a great place to engage them.
I don't know one person that's on Twitter in the architectural engineering construction industry.
Oh, architecture. Okay. Yeah, probably not then. Fair enough.
Architects maybe.
Yeah,
some,
it's a little bit of a laggard. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you meant engineering at like startups.
No. Construction mostly type.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I have one more question. If anyone else does not have it, anyone else wants to go for a question?
Yeah, Jen, actually, I have a few questions for you. So we are in the pet food and pet tech marketplace. Recently, or in next 6 months, we want to expand to the US market. And since Canadian regulation on pet food are very different, US on the pet food, one is FDA control, one is actually no regulation in Canada. And also our strategy to enter is we're going to take in charge of B2C consumers,
Sure.
and might find few distributors to carry our product in the US market, and how we are able to adopt when it comes to different regulations and a different product, a different marketplace, at different countries.
Yep. So what was the question?
Yep, one come to different regulations into.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that?
Yes.
That's a really good question. I'm not familiar with the pet food market, so I can't directly speak to it. But if I was seeking to understand regulation, I'm wondering, do you contact maybe a distributor, probably understand some level of the regulation market here, because they have to make sure it complies before they sell it. So maybe trying to have a few conversations with, just informal conversations with distributors. They usually are pretty well informed because they also have to approve and ensure that you went through all of the stage gates to get this approved. Otherwise, they're going to get in trouble for selling it. But I'm not quite sure how else to do that. I guess there's probably if you go on FDA, you probably can figure out what that process looks like. But highly regulated markets, we actually don't really play in. So I can't confidently give you a proper answer for that, unfortunately.
Okay. And just one question actually in my enterprise end. So right now, I'm with an enterprise client in Canada, actually. It's now in the US. We give them a quote on the price point. This is first 6 calls we have negotiated on the price, and they was emailing me back, said their profit margins was not good enough for them to able to sell the products,
Yep.
and that they will reject my product to sell in their chain stores. But they do like our products. I do think there's opportunity still going forward. And how do I address these issues moving forward?
Yeah, I would ask them. I would just ask them, what profit margin would you consider this at then? Right, because it sounds like you obviously didn't hit that threshold, but obviously they're going to overshoot it. Just know that you're going to want to negotiate them down. They're probably going to come in at the middle or at the highest end. But I would try to understand, what typical profit margin do they operate in your product? Because if they need to see, I don't know, like 30% and you're coming in at 5%, obviously it's a huge disconnect. But I think they're playing a little bit of a game with you, because I'm not sure why they weren't just overly clear about that. I think they're trying to see how low they can get you, which is why they're saying no. So maybe you want to talk to what I would do if I was in your position is I would talk to maybe a supplier that has worked with them and ask them what profit margin or what percentage of profit do they take? Because it sounds like they're kind of playing a little bit of a sneaky game, trying to get you to say a number and then back you into a corner.
Yeah, so they haven't they need disclose to me how many stores they're gonna carry our product, so we can do like a customized quote for them.
Yeah, but they haven't given you that.
They didn't. They just didn't give me that number.
Yeah, they don't want to give you much information.
I couldn't give them a customized quote because they couldn't give me the numbers, how many they're gonna order. So it's either is we can lower the price or we can ask about the profit margins they need reserve on their ends.
Yep. Yeah, I would maybe speak to someone that works with them, like a friendly like just reach out to someone like, hey, we're thinking about working with so-and-so. We'd love to just hear about your experience with them. And then do a little digging there. Because the fact that they're not being very upfront about that is a little odd. I don't know. Maybe you guys disagree, but they don't just say, hey, here's our minimum threshold we need to see. It's what most standard distributors ask for or state.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That's really helpful. Yeah, Vartika, you can go. I know you have a question.
Sure. Thank you. So, so for an international startup, say Canadian companies to break into US, what's the single most important lever in terms, is it the price, the product, the differentiated value, or maybe validation? So what catches the attention? Like when you're going to sending a cold email, what should be the focus there?
Yeah, it's usually a unique insight, right? So you've got to be problem led, right? People want their problem solved. They don't want to go out and just buy a solution. Like it's never fun. So hyper personalized, super concise, clear call to action. Like, hey, I'm looking to get 15 minutes of your time. I'm seeking to validate some assumptions. We are very passionate about solving X. But make sure X is somewhat insight driven and it's not just some generic statement. So personalized, concise, problem-led notes are what work here. The US market is very value driven. If someone thinks they're going to get an edge with you, they'll take a risk, right? It's super competitive even for them. So they like to find ways to create edge. Make sure you're also, validation is critical, but you also want to make sure you're validating people that are going to be early adopters. Otherwise, you're going to collect a lot of noise. So make sure, the people that you are learning from fit the criteria that you want to eventually sell to in the next 6 months. And then, lastly, I think that there is a grant from the Canadian government that if you're looking to expand into the US market, they will provide grant for that. One of our companies actually applied and got accepted into it. I think they got like $50,000 to expand into the US market.
Okay.
I can actually, if you guys are interested, let me just pull it up.
Yeah, maybe a link on the chat.
So it's I'll try and find the link.
Yeah, no worries. You can send it over to me later, or I'll find it. No worries. I mean, no rush there. We are
Yep.
almost on time as well. It's 11:45. So I just want to do one last call for any other questions before we wrap it up.
Wait, is this end at 12 or is it end at 11:45?
So 11:50 is because Jen has another call. She has to
Oh,
be.
okay, fair enough. Mine's totally unrelated. Like, I kind of want to know, taking steps back, what are, should we be opening a US bank account to accept US currency? Should we convert it over to our Canadian through Stripe or something? Should our contracts be going through US legal to ensure that we're covering off their law? Should it just be generic, like contracts that cover ourselves, like all that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, before you go through that whole rigmarole, make sure you have someone in positive proposal where it makes it worth it to go through that process.
Right.
So many people spend time setting up an entity here, getting all that stuff ducks in a row, and then like they're a year or two off from like actually being able to sell. Currency and all that, that's fairly straightforward. I would definitely, in the US market, if you're selling to large companies, they're going to want to have US law. So you will need to send them a contract that is based in US law, not Canadian law. Because if they, it's a matter of risk, they're not going to take that risk, because if they get sued, actually it's very hard to sue an international company, to be honest with you. We had an issue with a company in the APAC region, and our lawyers were like, there's really nothing you can do. So they're going to want that contract to be in US law. But I would wait until you actually are in a position to need that, and then go out and find it, and let that be your sense of urgency to figure that out. But until then, like, don't spend too much time in there until it's really a high priority.
Okay. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a great insight. So we are almost on time. So Jen, what's the best way to connect with you if some founders want to connect?
Yeah, so I am most responsive on Twitter DM. I get so many internal emails that it's hard to sift through sometimes, but I'm most responsive on Twitter DM, which is, I think it's just JJEN. I'll just type it in _Abel, ABEL. That's the best place to reach, and I'm super responsive on that.
Okay, perfect. You're definitely seeing me on Twitter next. So, well, on that note, thank you very much for taking the time and speaking with some of our founders. It's very unlikely that the rest of the batch didn't show up. Probably they're not expanding into the US, and these three companies are clearly are expanding. So, but on that note, thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And we hope that we see you more in more future workshops.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the time, and best of luck.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, guys.